Hi, and welcome back to Billy's VHS tapes. Do you like comic books and creepy stuff? Well, then you'll love 1982's Creepshow. Creepshow is an anthology horror film that features 6 scary stories, all written by Stephen King and directed by George A. Romero. Let's do some fun facts. Creepshow is an homage to classic horror comics from the 1950s published by EC Comics. EC is most well known for publishing Mad Magazine, but they also produce horror titles such as Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, The Haunt of Fear, and Weird Science. Both Stephen King and George A. Romero enjoyed reading these comics when they were kids, and it inspired them to collaborate on this film together. Most of the movie was shot in an abandoned school in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, where they had converted the school into a soundstage. Creature makeup and gore was done by world-famous Tom Savini and his crew. The team came up with some horrifying creatures as well as wrangled over 20,000 cockroaches. Gross. Creepshow spawned 2 movie sequels, and it also spawned 2 television spin-offs. Creepshow cost $8 million to make, and it brought in over $21 million at the box office. It was Warner Brothers' highest-grossing horror film of 1982. I love this movie, so without further ado, let's watch it!
And now, our feature presentation.
The movie opens with a wraparound story on Halloween. We meet a young boy named Billy. Hey. Billy is being scolded by his dad for reading horror comics. He thinks they're trash and throws it out. Billy is played by Stephen King's son, Joe Hill. Outside Billy's window, we see that he's been paid a visit by the Creeper from his comic book. Through visual cues, we see that the two of them have something sinister in store for Dad. From the trash can, the Creeper opens up the comic book and the opening titles jump off the page, leading us into our first story. A wealthy, snobby family await their Aunt Bedelia for their yearly get-together on Father's Day. As she makes her way through the countryside, we learn that today is the anniversary of the day that she murdered her father. Years before that, Bedelia's father had her boyfriend murdered because he was jealous of her happiness. I think it's safe to say that this family doesn't really get along. Every year, Bedelia returns to the scene of the crime to visit her father's grave. But this year, she's in for a real surprise. As she sits in front of his grave, remembering that horrible day, her father's corpse begins to reanimate and rise up out of his grave. Bedelia had been making her father a cake all those years ago before the horrible incident. She killed him before he ever got a chance to eat his Father's Day cake, and now he's returned from the grave seeking that cake.
Where's my cake, Bedelia? It's Father's Day, Bedelia.
Inside the house, the family grow impatient waiting on Aunt Bedelia. The newest member of the group, who plans on marrying into the family, makes his way outside to have a smoke. He makes his way to the graveyard looking for Aunt Bedelia, where he finds the open grave. He slips and falls into the hole, and the tombstone starts to slide forward. Using spooky mind powers, the old man zombie pulls the tombstone off of its base and crushes the poor guy. But he's not done yet. The old man makes his way to the house, still looking for his cake. Inside the house, the old man rips off one of the family members' heads and uses it to make his cake.
It's Father's Day, and I got my cake. Happy Father's Day.
The story has fantastic practical effects. The zombie makeup still holds up today. And I mean, come on, they stuck a lady's head through a silver platter to make us think that her head had been ripped off and put on it, and made into a cake. Love this story. It's my number 2 pick out of all 6. The Creeper then turns the page to reveal our next spooky story. As Jordys stands in the middle of his farmland, he watches a meteor fall from the sky. Goofy Jordy is played by Mr. Stephen King. The meteor lands in his backyard and he immediately thinks it's going to make him rich. He touches the rock and burns his fingers pretty bad, leaving some nasty blisters behind. After cracking open the meteor by throwing some water on it to cool it off, he brings it inside, and that's when things start to get a little messy. The meteor emits a glowing blue goo.
Meteor ship!
The goo begins to spread all over Jordy's land, filling it up with greenery that seems to get taller by the minute. Even Jordy has fallen victim to the goo and is becoming a weed man. In a desperate move, Jordy hops in the bathtub to try and wash it off. Afterwards, we see a time lapse where we see Jordy's land has become flourished with greenery, almost forest-like. In the corner, we see Jordy, who is now unrecognizable because from head to toe, he's covered in weeds and grass. We see him grab the shotgun, and Jordy's goofy story ends when he blows away his problems. As the greenery spreads to the roadside, we see that this story isn't over, and that the planet Earth is in for a lot of trouble. This story is more weird and goofy than it is scary, mostly because Stephen King is definitely hamming it up for the laughs. Until the last, 2 minutes when it derails into something completely horrifying. It's a fun story nonetheless. That's why it's my number 4 pick out of the 6. The wind blows, turning the pages of the comic book, revealing our third story. Harry receives a visit from Richard. Richard has come to confront Harry because he's been sleeping with his wife Becky. Richard reveals that he is holding Becky against her will, and if Harry ever wants to see her safe again, he'll take a drive with him down the beach. Near the water, a shovel sticks out of the sand. Harry runs towards it thinking it's Becky's grave, only to find out that it's actually his own. At gunpoint, Richard promises Harry that he'll see Becky again if he buries himself in the hole. After burying him up to his neck, Richard returns with a television set to show Harry that Becky is also buried up to her neck on another part of the beach. As the tide comes in, Richard leaves them both to drown for doing him wrong. But we all know that bad guys always get their comeuppance. Richard returns home, where he has multiple surveillance cameras pointed at his helpless victims. He watches them as the tide rolls in and slowly covers their heads with water. The next night, Richard begins to hear strange sounds outside of his house, but the only thing that shows up on his security cameras are billows of smoke. The sounds are then coming from inside the house, and the big reveal that Harry and Becky have returned as water zombies. They plan to bury Richard on the beach the same way that he did to them. The story ends with Richard buried up to his neck, claiming that he can hold his breath for a very long time. This story is not only supernaturally scary, it's also real-world scary. The idea of feeling helpless as death creeps closer and closer to you is very unnerving. Which is why I place it at number 3 out of 6 of the stories. Another gust of wind turns the page to reveal our 4th story. We see a maintenance worker flipping a coin to decide what chore he should do first. He drops his coin and it rolls underneath the stairs, where he finds an old crate that's dated from the 1800s. We cut to a college meet and greet where we meet 2 professors, Dex and Henry's horrible wife, Wilma.
Oh, just call me Billy, everyone does.
The maintenance worker phones Dex about the crate that he's found underneath the stairs and asks him to come check it out. Meanwhile, Henry fantasizes about murdering his wife.
Oh, God, Henry, what's wrong now?
Not a thing, Wilma. Everything's just fine.
Oh, Henry, can't you do anything right?
Huh?
Huh? That's what I figured. Huh? That's just what I'd expect from you.
Dex arrives at the school and he and the maintenance worker begin opening up the crate. While opening it, they hear strange sounds coming from inside. And the maintenance worker claims that he sees emeralds in there. But when he reaches in to grab them, he finds nothing but horror.
Looks like a couple of emeralds.
Inside the crate is a horrifying creature who roars at them. The hairy little goblin with sharp teeth and claws then devours the maintenance man. Dex runs away in terror, running into a student who is very commonly known for studying late at the school. In disbelief over his story, the student heads downstairs to check it out for himself. But his curiosity gets the best of him and he winds up becoming another meal for the monster. After watching two people get eaten, Dex heads over to Henry's house to tell him the whole story. And in a crazy twist of events, Henry begins to concoct an idea to feed his wife Billy to the monster to get rid of her. He drugs Dex to keep him out of the way, and he writes a letter to Billy asking her to come to the university. Henry cleans up the bloody mess that was left behind and he waits for Billy to arrive. He lies to her and tells her that Dex had a date gone wrong and now she's hiding under the stairs. When Billy climbs under the stairs to find her, Henry then begins slamming her up against the crate to get the monster's attention. But the monster refuses to come out, and Billy then begins to berate Henry.
You know what, Henry? You're a regular barnyard exhibit. Sheep's eyes, chicken guts, piggy friends, and shit for brains. No good at departmental politics. No good at making money. No good at making an impression on anybody. And no good at all in bed.
The monster can only take so much of Billy's voice before he pops out and grabs her. He locks eyes with Henry, almost as if to say, "Hey guy, thanks for the snack," and then he gobbles her up.
Just tell it, call you Billy.
Afterwards, Henry drops the crate into the quarry to get rid of the final piece of evidence, and Henry and Dex agree to never speak of this again. But down in the quarry, we see that the crate is being softened up by the water. He breaks free from his cage, and we end with a shot of his eyes glowing with rage. Love, love, love this story. The puppet is still top-notch, and the gore is awesome. Also, this story shows us two different kinds of monsters. A supernatural one who eats people, and a human one who would rather cover up murder than tell his wife how he feels and divorce her. This is the best story of the movie. #1 pick out of all 6. The comic book page turns again to reveal our final story. Mr. Pratt is a well-known businessman and germaphobe who crushes people like bugs. If only he could crush all the bugs in his fancy, supposed-to-be germ-free apartment. This is my least of the favorite stories because I hate bugs. The story has a very slow build, and it almost feels like a one-man show, but when the music cues kick in, you can almost actually feel the roaches crawling on your skin. Long story short, Mr. Pratt monologues into the night as he tries to rid himself of these creepy crawlies. But the more of them he kills, the more of them show up. Like a hydra with a million heads, they finally overthrow Mr. Pratt and crawl inside of him and feast on his insides. Gross. #6 pick, worst story, hate it. Although, if we were ranking them the other way and you asked me which one scares me the most, this one would be #1. Back in the wraparound story, we see two garbage men picking up trash. They find the Creepshow comic and skim through it and notice that somebody's sent away for a voodoo doll. Cut back to Billy's house where we see his dad just being an absolute delight.
Billy!
Upstairs, we find out Billy is the one who sent away for the voodoo doll, and he's using it to stab his father to death.
Teacher, to throw away my comic books. Ready for another shot, Dad?
With one last movie twist, we find out that the wraparound story is actually just another twisted tale from the Creepshow comic. This story automatically gets my #5 slot because of how much I hate the one about bugs. Plus, it's really short. I do like that it's a twist, though, that you don't realize that it's not a wraparound story, it's just another story. Billy fades into the comic book cover, and we see the creeper holding him up as the candle blows out, leading us to the credits. And that's it! That's Creepshow. 6 spooky stories by 2 masters of horror. It's definitely a different kind of horror movie. It's funny, and it has a lot of bright colors in it. Do I recommend it? I absolutely recommend this movie if you're a horror fan. It's really fun. Even the parts of it that I really hate, I can still enjoy because it's that good of a movie. When I think about anthology movies, this is the first movie that comes to mind, which means that it might actually be my favorite anthology movie. I've always been a big fan of anthology media, and I'm sure this movie inspired a lot of later horror anthologies that came out. You know, shows like Tales from the Crypt, Monsters, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Masters of Horror, American Horror Story, Black Mirror, you know, just to name a few. Tales from the Dark Side was originally conceived as a Creepshow television show, but when George Romero couldn't get the rights to the name, he carried on the project under a different title, and he actually created another anthology that people love today. But 2 years after he passed away, we finally got a Creepshow television show on Shudder. Well, that's about it for my Creepshow review. Thanks for watching, all you creeps. If you find yourself coming back to watch reviews of my tapes, you should hit that subscribe button. And make sure you like and share all of them so everybody gets to see it, not just you. Don't be selfish! Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Stay tuned for more reviews. And again, thank you. Like, share, subscribe. Bye.